Welcome back to ReikiCafe Radio. I am your host, Christine Renee, and today I'm joined with a special guest. Today we have on Marla Mervis-Hartmann, who is the creator of Love Your Body, Love Yourself. She is a Reiki master as well as a coach, and I really love the content she's putting out in the world, and I wanted to bring her on today as we kind of are starting to move through solar plexus energy of understanding our identities and our self-worth and our self-esteem and all the intricacies there. Marla has her area of expertise on body image, on loving yourself, on food. And I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be juicy. So welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yay.
Yay. So tell us a little bit more about your background. I know you were on a TED Talks. I know that you're doing Reiki. You're over in Hawaii. Fill me in about how this all kind of came together and what your mission and purpose is.
So my relationship with Reiki and healing my body and food all kind of came at the same time. So I was struggling with a lot of negative body image, a lot of disordered eating disorder stuff. So I was a restrictor, a dieter, and then a binger and over exerciser. I was really mean to my body. And I think that meanness, we'll get into this later, is just so normal for us to do to ourselves as women. And I just hit rock bottom over and over and over again. And really what I thought is really the only issue I have in my life is I can't control my food and my body isn't the weight that it wants to be, that I want it to be. So as soon as I get those two things figured out, then my life is going to be perfect. And so when I did finally hit that number and I controlled my food and I was on it, I was miserable. I was the most miserable I'd ever been. And that was the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. And I'm like, okay, this has nothing to do with my food. This has nothing to do with my body. This is a deep spiritual, this is big, right? And so I jumped into recovery. And in one of the support groups that I was in, there was a woman who had one hand on her heart and one hand on her belly. And she was sitting there on that couch, just loving herself up. And I was like, is she doing blatantly loving herself in public?
Right.
And so I obviously wanted what she had, right? So I went up to her afterwards. I'm like, what are you doing? And she said, Reiki. So she sent me to my first Reiki circle. And from that point on, I was hooked. And not only was I hooked in just the amazingness of Reiki and all that it is, but it really coincided with my recovery. It was the perfect match for what I needed to heal, to love myself, to calm down around food. And so it's been a journey and it still goes on, right? I have to eat all the time. I still have to learn how to love this body more. So it's deepening in the process. And so after finding Reiki and having Reiki help me figure out that I needed to heal my relationship with my sexuality and going down that route. And just, I feel like Reiki was like the gateway drug of spiritual studies, right? It was like the breath work, then the yoga, then all of the stuff, right? And so when I can remember the moment where I was sitting and I was pregnant at that moment. And I was like, oh, I think I'm good. And I'm like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, is to help other people through the Reiki, through coaching, through speaking, through all the things that I've learned, and help women primarily, because it is a mainly women's issue, although I do work with men, but to heal and to love themselves. So that's been my mission. And, I interweave Reiki into everything I do.
I love that. I love that so much because one, I love that Reiki always becomes the foundation for however we're coaching, and that it is the gateway drug. I don't know how many times I've heard this again and again and again from different spiritual entrepreneurs and Reiki practitioners, that Reiki opened the door to allowing them to see the big picture in their life and how that it can nourish our body, mind, and spirit. And so I'm curious if there was a time, like in the beginning, was there a specific action that you would take where it was loving your body with Reiki that really stands out to you?
Well, I think that it was, oh, I'm thinking of a couple different things. And one is I feel like Reiki is like that slow hug. It's like more you're in it, the more you immerse yourself in that energy. And that's what's so loving about it. It doesn't hit you over the head. It's like, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. It's like that chiseling away. And then that's when I'm like, oh, I was able to allow Reiki to love me when I couldn't love myself.
Yeah.
Right. And calling in this unconditional love. I have a couple different moments that I'm remembering. And even as a Reiki master, and even as somewhat in my recovery with this, I would still go to my Reiki circles and I would be sharing about loving yourself and, not being judgmental and all those things. And then I would sit and I would stand behind people and give them the Reiki, and I would see this mirror there. And I would be like, ew, you look so fat, or whatever the story was at that moment. And I was like, why am I doing this here? Why? Like, I was ashamed, so ashamed. Like, I can't, like, the Marla back there would be like, don't tell that story. Don't tell that story. Right. But I was so ashamed of it that here I am doing this, and I'm doing this Reiki and I'm being mean to myself. And then I realized that Reiki is a safe place for me to bring these shadowy parts of myself. It's like that part of me that still was holding on to, I don't like my body and I look disgusting, or whatever the story was, wanted to be in that room with Reiki, wanted to be healed. So that's why I find it's like you go on a yoga retreat and all of a sudden you're in your stuff, right? Or you're doing what I'm, giving Reiki to people, and that part of me comes up. So
Yeah. I love that invitation of allowing our full selves, our shadow selves, our dark spaces, welcoming that into the Reiki space, because we all have it, whether it's food or body image or something else, we all have it. So how are you, well, I'm curious if there was other Reiki stories along the body image or food abuse, that where Reiki kind of helped inspired radical change within you, or how you are doing that for others. So it might not be something like specifically in your past, but like, I think so many of us have body issues. So many of us have food issues. And culturally speaking, at least in this Western model that we both belong to, it's so ingrained in us to not be good enough, not to accept ourselves, that there's always something more to fix, to fix, to fix, to fix, instead of just accepting us who we are and how we are showing up. That I'm curious of how that is happening in your work,
yeah,
work.
so I've taught like Reiki balance for weight, Reiki for weight balance, and emotional eating and loving our. I do a body love Reiki circle at an eating disorder recovery center here in Maui, and the amazing piece of what Reiki does is it's releasing that stress that we're having in our bodies, right? And often when it comes to our food, there can be a lot of stress. Or if we're stressed out, it gets put right into how we eat, how we do one thing, how we do everything, as we've heard that before. And so what I have found is through having a Reiki practice and through giving my clients Reiki, their stress levels are coming down. And they're now not blaming the food and their body on, we're looking for the real issue, because it's never the food and it's never the body. That is the symptom on top. And so through the Reiki and through the coaching, we can go and like, who's afraid here? What part of you is afraid? And unwind a lot of the the tensions, the stories, the family programming, and all of that, and allow that not only to heal through the Reiki, through coaching, through inner child work, through somatic, experiencing, but through also getting it out of our tissue, out of our memory. And that's why I love bringing Reiki into my coaching, is because people are working really hard. And I've seen so many women who come to me, they have done everything. They've done every diet, they've done every experience, and they're working it hard. And I'm like, we need to have something in our healing journey that is soft, that is loving, that is graceful, that says, I have you, I love you, right? And so the Reiki for me, and what I found is that, and I just shared a story about shame, but when people are emotionally eating, right, or they're in a binge cycle. So I'm kind of going on a little rant here, but when we're on a binge diet, when we're on a diet cycle, when we're dieting, so we're dieting and we're feeling really good, we're feeling elated, we're losing some weight, we're feeling great, right? And then all of a sudden something happens and we get stressed out, or we go on vacation and we start losing weight and we start gaining weight, right? And then we have like a binge, right? Because we dieted for so long and we've restricted. And then right after that binge, right after that moment of out of control or getting on the scale, we go into a pocket of shame. And people will ask me, how do I stop emotionally eating? And it's not by fixing the diet. It's not by controlling it. It's by going to the moment where we could have shame. And that's the moment the Reiki comes in. So instead of being like, I can't believe I'm doing this, here I am again, why am I doing this? I should have known better. I shouldn't have done blah, 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 blah. I was doing so good. I was I'm the good girl. I'm controlling everything. But that moment of shame is the moment of awakening, where we have to slow down and say, I'm going to compassionately love this part of me. I'm going to Reiki the shit out of this part of me, right?
Yeah.
And hold that and love on that. That's what brings us back into a more peaceful place with ourselves.
Oh, I love
That
it
makes sense.
so much. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I love how you're finding the point of that shame point of going, this is what is that needs the love, it needs the support. And it's not necessarily going all the way back to the first childhood wound necessarily. It's right there in that moment of now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is important, right? Because I've had a lot of clients who they're like wanting to stop binging. And then when we get to the crux of the little one who had their food was their love. And I remember very specifically with a client I'm like, does she want to let that food go? Does she want to stop binging? Like, no.
Yeah.
And that's a moment to realize that love and food can be connected. And that's why we can start to replace the relationship with love to be for ourselves, or we can bring Reiki in instead of the food.
So where does like pleasure come into the scene? Because I know.
Oh,
yeah, go for it. Take off with that.
Yeah. I mean, if you just feel into, so if we think about pleasure and we think about, we often jump to sexuality, which is fine. It's very true. And it's the highlight of pleasure, sexuality, our sensuality, our senses. And food is such a sensual, intimate experience. It's the one thing that is only for us.
Mm.
The food is so intimate, it goes inside, right? And we get to navigate that pleasure with our bodies. And as we know, with the Reiki, as we bring this Reiki in, we're softer, we're less stressed out. That gives us more capacity for more pleasure. And then when we think about our food, And, if the one thing that I would say for you to do is definitely Reiki your food before. Definitely slow down, close your eyes, put your hands on the Reiki, affirm how you want the food to go in and how you want your body to digest it. Say a prayer to God or whatever you do. But that can change so much.
Yeah.
That can change so much. And that can allow for the pleasure. And also to go on another little bit with the pleasure, but also I've seen this, unfortunately, a lot of people who have eating disorders have had some sort of sexual violation. And it's the way to hurt self with food. It's a way to put ourselves down, and it's a way to control. Because if we had something that was out of our control sexually that has happened to us, the way that we can control it is with restricting or dieting or whatever the story is. So to reclaim that and heal that and let actual pleasure in, actual love in, can begin to heal both the sexual and the food and our self-esteem, our confidence in self.
Yeah, that was like light bulbs right there. Like just to recognize those with sexual trauma. And that is, 25% of women, 30% of women, probably that's what's documented, right? Like it's so much higher sexual assault.
Well, I think so, because I think there's like the small T and the big T, right? Yeah. And I know that early on in my Reiki training, we did a practice where we would go back to every year and revisit it and be with it and Reiki it and all of that. And I remember having a block and being like, something happened there. And then years later, realizing something that had happened in my life that I just thought was just no big deal. It wasn't addressed in my family as anything that was a big deal, was actually to my being, to this body, a violation that has shaped me. And I think because sexual assault, and there's so many awful stories, that when we've had something happen to us that seems small, we can be like, that's not that big a deal.
Right.
It's not, and it actually is. It really is. And to slow that down and really be with ourselves, because it may not be a big deal to this being, but my 6-year-old was very upset and very confused. Right. So, and I also think that I know when I moved to New York City and I had so many men saying things to me when I would walk by, and that felt like I was constantly, like, talk about low, like self-esteem. I would have to make myself into this Marla. And is when I found Reiki that I would walk those streets, I'd put my Reiki bubble up and I'm like, woo, hoo, right? And I just I'm not going to let that man, that person over there diminish my power. So with Reiki, I was really able to expand and feel that protection. And that was a game changer for me. That was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's like finding those moments of expansion and Reiki as the catalyst for that expansion of like, I can be my full self. I don't have to apologize for anything. And I can walk through whatever situation and be fully who I am. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I know you've got your work with the rehab center. You've got your work doing coaching and working with people's body image and confidence. What's in so many areas? You've got your sexuality work, and what's your favorite? Like what it like really lights you up, or is it all of it?
Program called Everyday Reiki that I started years ago. And it really combines everything, because I do one-on-one coaching with the participants. I love every one of them. There's so much love. And And then once a month, we meet and we do Reiki together. And in that, I also bring in guest speakers or people who can bring in other modalities. So I've had human design and yoga nidra and some Kundalini yoga. Next week, I'm doing Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian traditional forgiveness practice. And so it's been so amazing because, oh, and I also send Reiki to them every day. So every night before I go to bed, I have my little Reiki box and people will send me intentions. And so that's my favorite because that's a mix of everything. We're doing practice, we're doing Reiki, they're getting Reiki, and then they're getting one-on-one coaching with me so we can go deeper. And I love that. I love that. Because some people, I have a lot of clients who actually don't have issues with their body and food, and they're just wanting to dive deep and heal. And what I have found as a through line with a lot of my clients, along with the food stuff and the body image stuff, is they want to be themselves and something is in the way, whether it's the food, the body image, or just their own stuff. They're just like, I can feel myself and there's something in the way, right? And I want to heal whatever this is. So that's my favorite.
I love that. I love how simplistic we can get with it. Actually, it's just identifying and removing the obstacle through Reiki,
Yes.
through these practices. So how is that feeling when it comes to cultivating the confidence of your students, your clients? Like, tell me more about is it Reiki with other activities? Is there certain programs that you really like to get your clients involved in? Like, I love that there's a smattering of your monthly workshops, if you will. Is there something that you find very catalyzing for your clients, like an activity that our listeners could jump on board with?
Let me think. Something that
Cultivates confidence.
cultivating confidence. Well, here's something that I teach people who are dealing with food stuff around confidence. So I have a program called Body Compassion Collective, and one of the modules is all around confidence. Because what I find with people, so you can take this with food, you can take this with your body, you can take this with whatever that thing is for you, but they create these huge goals, and they're like, okay, so the holidays are coming up. When I go to Thanksgiving, I'm home with my family, I'm not going to binge it all. I'm not going to eat any dessert. I'm going to have one plate of food. And it's like, okay, this is someone who just started with me. They've been binging almost every day. And now all of a sudden they're going to go back to where it all started with their family. And they think they're not going to have anything like that. So it's like, no, we got to build confidence, because it's not about the action. It's not really about the binging. I mean, it is, but it isn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about that. It's about building confidence in ourselves so that we feel good. Like, I did that. So it's like, okay, I'm going to eat a lot of vegetables with my pumpkin pie, or I'm just going to have, okay, like, how many pieces of pie are you really going to have? You may actually binge on 6. I'm like, how about, what would it feel like if you gave yourself 2 and a really big cookie? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's something where you're still feeling like you're doing something better for yourself. Because I find that this just sets everyone up for defeat.
Yeah.
And then you don't feel bad. Then you go into that shame piece. So it's really about slowing down and being like, what's that next thing that I can do? So it's like, oh, I'm depressed. I'm not feeling good. Okay. I really want to create this whole huge experience and do something and travel and all that. It's like, how about just write down 10 things that you are grateful for today? How about that being something that you do? Like, start from where we are and make your goals, just bite-sized goals, because then they can build on each other.
Yes. I love that. So many coaches and practitioners Like they hyper focus on like the big ginormous thing, and then it feels totally unachievable. And then you're feeling bad about yourself because you didn't make it. And it's like, I love the bite-size baby step approach of like, we'll get there. Like I'm all about slow and steady growth. Like slow and steady is going to be sustainable.
Yeah, because I find that the things that I'm so proud of myself for are not things that I would put on Facebook. Like, I'm so proud that my husband said that thing to me, and I just took a breath and went, okay. Like, like I did that. I didn't freak out. I didn't go into overwhelm, right? Like, it's these small moments where we get to be more of who we are. We get to be the truth, that authentic part that's not in trigger, that's not in activation, that's not upset. And those are the things you can tell your best friend or whatever. And that's where confidence grows. I mean, there's certain things I've done where I wrote a book, and I have to say I'm super proud of myself. That was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, something that I'm striving for. So congratulations. I love that.
Thank you.
I love that so much for you. And I love that you are inviting our listeners to go celebrate the small things, celebrate the small wins. I love it when my students and clients tell me I didn't have my trauma reaction like I normally would have. I slowed
Right.
down and I got curious. I took 5 breaths before I responded to whatever it was. That's what I'm proud of, because those are the things that are going to really build upon one another so that they can make a lifelong change.
Yeah, because it really does have a ripple effect, right? If we have those trauma reactions and then going back to, I say something mean back to my husband or whatever, now we're in this experience. Now I'm not feeling very good. Now the last thing I want to do is do, my creative endeavors, right? I'm still in that reaction space. So that does really make a difference with our confidence.
For sure. Okay, so tell me about your book.
Okay, so it's called Befriend Yourself, Finding Freedom with Food and Peace with Your Body. And it's all about my journey and story. I'd say it's a memoir / self-help book. And so it's really going into what I did to heal. So of course there's lots of Reiki going on in there too, because
Oh,
that's been my path.
I love that. I love that. Will you please, we'll put all of that book information in the show notes. So if listeners are like, I want to check that out, we're going to have that information as well as the way to connect with Marla. Marla, do you have any other words of wisdoms or top takeaways that you want to share with our listeners before we close up our chat today?
Yeah. Well, what I'd love to offer them is my free course on breaking the cycle of emotional eating. Now that's going to dive into, I really went all out on giving all of my good stuff in there. So that is really about compassion, dealing with stress, how to deal with that, how to break down the emotional eating in a way that's loving and caring. And so I really would invite you to check that out. And as I said, there's some Reiki going on in there as well. So I would say that if you're on this journey and you are experiencing having pain and having a painful experience with food, and that you're not very kind to your body, I would like for you to look at yourself and realize that you don't have to like your body. But if you're following the path of Reiki, you really want to love it. So you may look in the mirror and be like, ugh, but you're still going to feed it, and you're still going to nurture it, and you're still going to do self-care, and you're still going to get your good sleep, right? And just do all those things, and then lean into, okay, like, what can I do to heal my relationship with my body and my food? But really differentiating liking and loving. So keep leaning into the love, keep leaning into the love.
I love that tip, because so often we get the two terms confused.
Yes.
Right? Love and like are two very different things. And we're coming from a compassionate place if we're loving on ourselves. And that we're knowing that we're worthy of it. We're worthy to have a clean body, a well-fed body, a supported body. Like we're worthy of that.
Yeah. And it's always going to change.
Yeah.
Our bodies are changing by the minute. That's a whole other. We're in a cycle. So don't hold on to anything. Just know you're in a cycle.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll put those free resources in the show notes along with her book link. And then if people want to get a hold of you, I can just send them over to your website.
Yes. Yes. I'll send you all the details.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I hope it has inspired many of our listeners and learners to love themselves more fully and more deeply for just the way they are. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and coming on today.
Thank you for having me.